You're listening to The Noon Show on Good Time Oldies 1290 and 102.7 WIRL.
By the way, going back to the early part of the first segment, we were talking about pigs and chalk. Pig fat can actually be used in chalk, cosmetics, floor wax, crayons, antifreeze, and weed killers, which segues us quite nicely into our Facets of FS segment now with Jeff Bunting. Jeff is Squirrelmark's Crop Protection Marketing Manager. Jeff, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. I am looking at a column that you actually wrote a couple of years ago, and I wonder how true it is today. Today's crop protection products face a challenge in terms of having enough supply to manage pests over the course of the growing season. That's because it is a global business now. Is that as true today as it was a couple of years ago?
That is true today, DeLoss, and again, it all basically kind of, there's really two major issues there that I see, and a couple things that it is true today in regards to the overall global demand of our products, and again, I go back to one that probably a lot of us are aware of, as well as your listening audience, being glyphosate. I mean, that product is used in many different parts of the world, and predominantly on the soybeans, and as well as corn, and again, a lot of us right now, probably in the States as well as in China, look at the production of glyphosate and what impact that would have as it makes its way across the water into the acres that we have in the U.S.
Do other parts of the world talk about glyphosate resistance like we do here, especially like we will here in the next couple of months?
Oh, they sure do. I mean, they sure do. And one of the things, if you ever get a chance and want to really kind of be the area of expertise at maybe a cocktail party or maybe a dinner function, but there's a website. Weedscience.org, I believe, is the website that talks about all the number of resistant weeds to everything you want to know about as it pertains to what family chemistries, what countries are they seeing it in. It really is a nice way to kind of get up to speed what's going on in other parts of the world.
I like having those kind of bits of knowledge too. So I recognize exactly what you're talking about there. So we weren't the only farmers then who said this stuff is great. Let's use it year after year. That apparently that in some ways that's a tribute to how good the product was. But unfortunately, that's what happens when you have a product so good that you just want to use it over and over again.
Yep, exactly. And again, right now as we kind of look at I've been in the business a number of years, and I go back to when Brenda beans were first introduced back in the mid '90s, and just the overall impact that had on our production and the ability to control weeds. But again, too much of a good thing is probably a bad thing, and unfortunately, we're seeing some of the challenges today that came about because of the over reliance of that molecule and the way it was used.
What can we be doing now, 10th of February, especially since we don't know, hopefully we'll have something near as suitable as last year's planting season was, but just in case we're early or just in case we're late, what can we be doing now, if anything, to get ready?
Yeah, I again, as I make the travel, and I'm sitting today in Southern Illinois, and on the way down, I saw a lot of guys in the field, mostly doing some tillage work, and again, that may be a couple things, maybe leveling off some of the ruts from last year's, we'll call it the tattoos of last year's harvest. May have been a little too wet out there, but again, identifying some of the strategies that put in place. It wasn't too long ago that maybe you saw a patch of weeds in a field, and hopefully it's been identified, and you know how to develop that strategy around that particular population. Again, there's been a lot of meetings over the winter months. You understand some of the issues that we're seeing. The spread of Palmer amaranth as it comes into the south and moves to the north. You've been at the university meetings, and Dr. Hager there at the University of Illinois has talked about glyphosate resistance and the spread of that. And those are all the things that keep in the back of your mind. And unfortunately, right now, in And some of the challenges that we're seeing is, with these commodity prices, there's a lot of discussion about cutting back on input costs. And that really is kind of a threat that I see right now, is that if we cut back and go back to a glyphosate application, maybe not once but twice, and possibly a third time, and maybe you might have had a problem today, but over relying on that particular active is just not a sound agronomic decision. And today, to come before in regards to supply, there is a lot of good options out there to throw in another mode of action, another side of action that can be utilized even in the bearish commodity prices that we're seeing today, the corn and bean prices that we're seeing on the market.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the third time. I think about last year, where the first application may hurt the crop or hurt the weeds a little bit, but not enough. The second time you pass through, it almost looks like it didn't even make a dent. And so if you're thinking about margins, you're thinking about, well, do I need to make a third pass, or do I need to save that money? That is a tough decision to make, isn't it?
It is. And again, right now, as you go back to your earlier question in regards to what you do now, I mean, really, it's to kind of sit down and I guess develop your playbook. I mean, look at one thing that's probably still as unknown is maybe the acre shifts. Am I going to plant corn? Am I going to plant soybeans? If I plant corn, what are my options on the herbicide perspective? If I plant soybeans, what do I use there? Will I be able to get in? And again, my travels south today in Illinois. Usually by now you see a little bit of green material out there, thinking, well, maybe you see a little bit of the wing angles, but there's really not a lot coming, which is probably a good thing. So maybe you can look at the overall program for a burn down and basically tweak that based on what's out there. And again, that local FS specialist can definitely help you identify what is the best way to invest your input dollars into the crops.
Hey, you mentioned burn down. That made me think, with 1 million acres devoted to cover crops just in our state, does that change the game at all, especially if we have to do a burn down as a first step to get ready for the spring?
That's right, exactly. And that's one thing, too, that we're seeing across not only Illinois but also in Iowa. The number of cover crops that are being established in the fall, that, again, all the different environmental benefits, the economic benefits to it, and come March, April, I mean, those become a weed that we need to control and get that somewhat under control so that you can get the nice crop stand that you want for that to maximize the yield potential.
Is there any concern necessarily about soil moisture at this particular time of year? It hasn't necessarily been that wet for the better part of the winter, or does that mean anything right now?
Well, I think as I look across and contact and discussions, right now soil moisture isn't a major concern for me, especially if you have a little bit of snow. And it hasn't been a lot of snow in southern Illinois, but again, they've had a pretty good amount of rainfall that's come through late last year, and in some parts of the listing area that we have in central northern Illinois, there's a little bit of snow still in the ditches, but again, not a big concern right now from my perspective or anything that's been discussed in my travels.
Gotcha. I bet this time of year there's a lot of travels, aren't there?
I call it the winter run right now, and it's we approach the middle of February and we get towards March, and meetings kind of start slowing down and get back to what we're all good at, and getting the crop in the ground, and my role within GrowMark is to protect that crop from time it's planted to when it comes off in the fall. So I'm ready for it, and hopefully it'll be here pretty quick.
Mm-hmm. When you talk about too the game plan, I assume most people at this point have their tillage plans in place too. Is that part of how we determine what we're going to use for crop protection, whether that's strip till, no till, conventional, whatever the case is?
Sure. Yeah, that's one thing too. Is we look at the late harvest, and made a comment earlier about some of the tillage that I saw today coming south in southern part of Illinois. That's a very effective means to control some of the winter annuals, and unfortunately we had the late harvest, and in some areas it's probably a little bit tacky when the combines are rolling through there. So those fields that may have been a no-till could could easily become a conventional till program. So those are all different tools and methods to control the vast number of populations and weeds that we have out there, and they all should be considered when making that management plan, or that build that playbook for that particular crop.
All right. Well, good to visit with you, Jeff. Safe travels. I'm sure we'll see you soon.
Very good. Thank you.
That's Jeff Bunting. He is Growmark's Crop Protection Division Manager, and saw a piece that he had on an fssystem.com website in which he wrote, this was even last year, he wrote, as we continue to see the commodity prices fall just like our air temperature, now is not the time to reduce or eliminate herbicides or strategies that many of you have implemented over the last 3 to 4 years. So especially if you need to make 2 or 3 passes through a field, those are challenges on just how to do that and still make money on the corn or soybean crops. But the local FS crop specialist can help understand various offerings and provide agronomic recommendations to have clean fields. Hopefully we will have plenty of clean fields, not just later this spring, but throughout the growing season. Stay tuned. We will have more next on Good Time Oldies 1290 and 102.7 WIRL and 1290WIRL.com.